Hello, Endeavor here. So today I'm speaking with Paul Talk, or the artist formerly known as Thought Thug. We spoke about 2 weeks ago, and I kind of wanted to continue the conversation we were having. How are you doing today, Paul?
I'm all right. How are you?
Not bad. Thanks for coming on.
Okay.
Um, he's rebranded his channel, but it's the same channel. I linked him down below, so check him out. Uh, so today what we're going to talk about is we're going to kind of continue where we left off about really what's the nature of the left and the right, what kind of makes someone left wing and right wing, and what do they really want for the world, and how the idea of nationalism would fit in on that. I'll let you go first, Paul. What do you really see as someone like what really makes someone left wing? What really makes someone right wing? What's the difference between the two of them?
Yeah. Well, I after our last conversation, I did a series of small videos reflecting on those things, and it's possible to give useful definitions to left and right, in my opinion, but they're ultimately insufficient because nothing will cover all cases. And I think you have to go back to a difference which ultimately is the difference between the ancient pre-modern attitude and the modern attitude to get something fundamental. But there's so much crossover. Of course, today, people like ourselves have a pretty good idea of how we feel about what's right and left. But there's this deeper aspect which makes things confusing. For instance, I know that you feel that nationalism is a right-wing thing, but it really started up in the modern era with the French Revolution and so on. And there is a how shall I put this? It's there were certain attitudes that were considered left and right around the idea of nationalism, which have evolved since then.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
And so nationalism was initially associated. I mean, the first kind of really people talk about the wars between different European countries, France and England, and so on, as if they were nations in the 16th, 17th century, but that's not quite how it was seen. A nation, the colonial people in America, for instance, they talked about the Indian nations, and the Indian nations were associated with a tribe, and therefore with people who were eventually, a tribe is a group of families, really, and those tribes were more or less nomadic, or they could settle down or conquer new territories or be driven out, but they remained a nation. And now we have the idea of land and blood and soil, which is a modern idea. And that modern idea, the one thing about it is that initially it's associated with collectivism.
Okay.
And so to now, I mean, of course, one could have I'm just saying that when one talks about nationalism, one ultimately has to go and look at that collectivist modern origin of it to see that there's something problematic in labeling it right wing. It became labeled. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
It became labeled right wing after the First World War and so on, and Nazism and so on, for political reasons that had to do with those times. But it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, I would say that really what makes someone left wing and right wing, at least in my view, it's I see someone on the right as really wanting a sense of order in society, whereas someone on the left, they want a sense of liberation. So someone on the right probably favors hierarchy. Someone on the left probably favors equality. And an analogy that I often hear is that maybe to a right winger, a ideal society would look something like the Roman Empire, whereas to a left winger, an ideal society would look something like John Lennon's Imagine. That's an analogy I often hear. And
Yeah.
you know, I think the idea of nationalism is not, it's not exactly a right wing idea or a left wing idea. I think it's
Mhm.
what it really is I think it's kind of the politicization of kind of a of tribalism and kind of just like in group preference that people just naturally tend to have. And yeah,
Well,
go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, except at the origin, it was a way of getting beyond tribalism. France, prior to Richelieu, and it was Louis the 13th, and then with Louis the 14th. I mean, France was, people spoke all different kinds of languages in France, even up until 50 years ago.
Yeah,
And
but okay, go ahead.
yeah, so it was. There were. I mean, even today, there's certain areas of France, like in Brittany and somewhere, where
Yeah,
there's a strong regional identity, and there's little separatist movements going on in these areas, in different
yeah.
areas. So the nation was violently imposed. Do you know about the wars of the Vendée during the Revolution? There was a part
Yes.
of so there was a part of France that violently resisted the revolution, and they were crushed. And no tribalism allowed. It became, it's little like the American idea.
Yes.
You sign on to the Constitution, and it doesn't matter where you're from or anything else. If you're willing to bear arms for the Constitution, you're an American. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. What I'd say though is that really the idea of nationalism, it tries to kind of unite a people under kind of a shared identity of some kind. So
mhm.
and I would say that it's either left wing or right wing depending on how it's being used. So I mean, I'd say that in the present day, I mean, I call myself I'm a nationalist. I think I'm
Mhm.
I guess you could call me a Canadian nationalist. I don't really know what the phrase. I just call myself a nationalist.
Yeah.
I'd say that the reason that would put me on the right would be because I'm really trying to preserve a more traditional, a more structured and a kind of a more hierarchical society. Whereas, say, someone like a black nationalist in 1970, he'd be trying to kind of tear down the order of the United States at that time, or an Irish nationalist in the early 20th century, he'd be kind of opposed to the order of the United Kingdom at the time, and he'd be
Yeah.
trying to
Okay.
create
All right.
a more equal society, really.
Yeah. All right. But where do you come down on free speech?
Well, the thing is that I don't really think that policies are as much right wing or left wing as more as what you really want to do with them. So, you know, maybe I think that's another example that maybe the the left wingers in the 1960s, they talked all about how great freedom of speech was because they thought that freedom of speech would bring about an equal society, whereas today, you know, as all of us know, the left wingers are extremely against
Well,
freedom of
yeah,
speech because,
but freedom. Yeah.
well,
Yeah,
they're
because they want
against
to
it
oppose their
because,
thing. But
well,
yeah.
I think the
Sorry.
reason they're against it though is because today they see it as a threat to equality and really kind of a threat to really kind of what they see as their goal in achieving a more equal society, and I
Well,
think
yeah,
that's
but I
kind of
mean,
why they. Yeah.
identifying the SJW program with equality is a little bit much. I mean, what they're interested is in a very perverse kind of radical egalitarianism, which is a twisted notion of traditional notions of equality. So you have to make that distinction because you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, uh, I you can go pretty far if you want to have inequality. If you're against equality, do you want to go back to the idea where there'd be, say, different orders of society with different systems of justice for each one? I mean, maybe that was done for a long time, but you might not want to go back that far. So you might not like this extreme egalitarianism. I certainly don't. But the business, say, for instance, of insisting that gender is completely loose, loosey goosey, and anything's anything, and to level things out in this incredible way, ignoring obvious physiological and psychological factors is so extreme that it's not really an argument against normal egalitarianism, if you like. It depends how you define these things.
Well, yeah, the ideology of SJWs, it's all based on the blank slate, really. So the reason is because they kind of see everyone as just this interchangeable blank slate, and that the reason that and to them the only reason that there is inequality is because of the systems of oppression, or the kind of the critical theory arguments that they usually use.
Right.
And I mean, the measures that they're taking, they see that as a way of breaking apart their perceived inequalities. Really, that's kind of what to me that's what they use to justify their actions. Really.
Right. But if you look for the origins of, say, free speech in the 1960s, that's no good. How about looking in the late 18th century to the First Amendment of the American Constitution? The government shall make no law.
Yes, but I think that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not the same thing. Those are both things that come under the bailiwick of free speech, or in the category of free speech, but they're radically different visions of what free speech is. So, of course, if you're for, say, a traditional American value of free speech, in some flavor or other, that doesn't necessarily contradict a desire for more order. These things are always a matter of degree, wouldn't you say? I mean, it's you can go too far in any direction.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So today, the people on the right, or a certain kind of right, they're fighting to bring back the idea of free speech to something like a more normal point, and that would be. Is that a fight for order? Maybe it is.
I think that free speech is a means to an end. So when you're the authority, maybe you're the one. Maybe you'd be the one against free speech. Whereas when you're trying to when you're against the current orthodoxy, you'd probably be in favor of free speech. So that's kind of why I think in the '60s the left.
But in the Constitution, free speech isn't a means to an end. It's the end. See, the idea of the Constitution was to set up a situation where people, they would live together in an orderly way, but they would be free. That was the idea. There would no longer be this hierarchical society which had a tendency to box people in and stifle them. I mean, that's how it was seen. You can say, well, I don't like that situation. I want to go back to a more medieval kind of situation or something. That's okay, but you have to see what that, say, for instance, that particular ideal was. The freedom of speech was seen as an end, not as a means.
Yeah, I would say that in terms of the 18th century, I think that liberalism in the 18th century was considered a left-wing idea. I would think, because it was meant to it was meant to eliminate a lot of the hierarchy of the day. Go ahead.
Well, at the same time, if you use the word liberalism, the idea of, say, what has happened since the 1990s, where after the end of the Cold War and American military dominance of the world, so that shipping became free and everybody started making money, and then you develop this planetary elite that wants to take over and so on, and then they have this discourse about free trade and so on, and ignoring local conditions in this horrible way, and that becomes labeled liberalism or as part of liberalism. It's not exactly the same thing as what Adam Smith had in mind. You know, so there again, one has to be careful. It's
well,
like
yeah.
the problem of
Go ahead.
yeah. No, that's all. It's
when I the phrase liberalism, it's kind of a it has multiple meanings. Because usually when I say liberalism, I'm referring to the ideas of John Locke, of the idea of democracy, the idea of um, I view it as like as an egalitarian system, but I think that you need to make a difference between, say, like liberalism, that idea, and the Democratic Party, because it's often like just associated with someone being on the left, which I don't necessarily think is 100% true.
Well, for instance, the Republicans and the Democrats have, and this has happened over my lifetime, they've changed places. The Democrats are now the party of the rich people and the elites and so on, and the Republicans have become the party of the poor people. And when I was a kid, it was exactly the opposite. The Republicans were considered the party of the establishment and the rich people and so on, and Democrats were seen as fighting for the little guy. So they've exactly changed places. Not exactly, because the left was always the Democratic Party was the slavery party, and they've always been basically for slavery without saying it. And whereas the Republican Party has always fought slavery, but
well,
so
I think that the positions have changed over time. So the Republican Party has become a conservative party, whereas perhaps in the 19th century, maybe the Democratic Party would have been a more conservative party. But
no, they weren't conservative. They were always they were the separatists. They were the Southern separatists,
yes.
And they were so it's but just say over the period of my lifetime, in terms of the social classes associated with the two parties, the position has been reversed, exactly reversed. So there, the Republican Party is always seen as being on the right, and the Democratic Party is always as being on the left. But that again is related to propaganda. So these are things that because now slavery is seen as on the right, whereas the Democrats in the 19th century saw slavery as being part of states' rights. They had the freedom to enslave people. So you can see how there's a lot of word salad in there.
Yeah, because it's really not an exact science. So
no,
but because right. I think it changes. I think it changes depending on your time and age. But the thing I see as the constant is really that that wish for a push for equality versus a push for hierarchy. And I think that kind of what puts me on the right is that I think that society is naturally hierarchical, and that I think that's kind of that creates a better society, and that societies just naturally develop as that. Whereas I see egalitarianism as kind of a revolt against the natural order and creating unstable societies.
Well, what about this proposition? I listened to a video of Black Pigeon Speaks, or whatever his thing is, and he makes an amusing point, which is that if women didn't have the vote, a whole lot of countries politically, and he gives all kinds of examples of that, and so maybe if women weren't allowed to vote, then in spite of liberalism, you would have the kind of hierarchical, orderly society that you're interested in.
Well,
and for instance, if you didn't have, he gives the example of certain European countries very recently, that it's that overwhelming female vote that has put these pro-immigrant people and kept out the strong anti-immigration people.
Yeah, well, I think that because I have a lot of problems with democracy. I think my problem with it is more about kind of the people that run the democracy and kind of what's in their best interest, because I kind of see it as a system that's run for it's being run by the politicians for their own political gain rather than
Well, you know, I listened to you develop this argument in several videos, and you know, I see your point, but this is how I see it. The thing, this modern democracy we have, it develops out of Rousseau in many aspects.
yes.
And you know, Locke is a cleaned up version of Rousseau, and Rousseau's sort of a cleaned up version of Hobbes, which is a cleaned up version of Machiavelli. But the thing about Rousseau is, again, it gets back to this nationalist idea. So there's the collective. All the sovereignty comes from the people. And you can't alienate, this is, you know, extreme Rousseau. You can't alienate the sovereignty from people. So the people elect officials who are elected for a set term. And then their power is taken from them and the people get to have a new election. You know, the sovereignty returns to the people at fixed intervals. And this means that the politicians, as long as they remain within their mandate, the politicians are in a certain way not personally responsible. In a certain way, they're the creature, the organ of the popular will. Now, of course, you know, in practice, people get in there and exploit this thing, and there's a lot of corruption. But in theory, you really can't you can't reproach a democratic politician for doing what he was elected to do, and or, you know, filling his office that he was elected for according to whatever the, you know, constitutional norms are that he's expected to obey. Then, of course, you know, there's corruption. So Hillary Clinton doesn't, and Obama and so on don't you know, they do any damn thing and then they get away with it. Or Merkel decides to change all the rules and let in hundreds of thousands of people who have no business being there. You know, of course, those are abuses of the thing. But theoretically, it's collectivist. You know, so it's not. So you're right when you say that the politicians are just kind of out for themselves and they're irresponsible and they can't be punished for what they do in a certain way, except that situation, the foundation of that situation is this sovereignty of the people. So the way ultimately to get around it is you get rid of the sovereignty of the people, and then the people become subjects. So there's your more fundamental choice. Do you follow this? Maybe I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, that democracy is the sovereignty of the people. That's the argument that Rousseau would have made.
Endeavor?
Oh yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, it was cut off for a minute.
Oh, sorry. So you were referring to Rousseau, correct?
Yeah.
That the sovereignty of the people would be a democratic system, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that I don't think it really works like that, because like, for example, if we look at Brexit in the UK, there was no major political party that was in favor of Brexit. It was only UKIP, a small party, and when they voted in the national referendum, they voted in favor of it, and you know, since then the powers that be have completely botched it. And because like my problem is that
I understand you're saying that they're just, you know, they turn out to be fallible individuals, is what you're saying, and they might just be corrupt and so on.
Yeah. But I mean, my real problem though is that because like I think that if the other example we could use is, say, Angela Merkel, it's like I don't think that I don't like because the problems that are going to be caused in Germany from her policies are going to be intergenerational. They're going to be I mean, that's something that could affect Germany.
Well, maybe they are. Maybe they are.
I mean, unless they're
because
fixed, yes, because
you could imagine that I don't know, they get rid of the female vote and all the men
well, here's the
vote
thing.
to push these people into the North Sea. That could happen.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I don't think that's kind of the issue. I think that the issue is just in general with it's not really as much with for me it's not as much the voters. It's more the nature which the people that they elect run the country. Because like my problem is that, say, Angela Merkel, I mean, she's never gonna have to pay for her disastrous mistakes. The most that'll ever happen to her is she'll be voted out of office. Well, she's been in office for 10 years now. It's like she doesn't have any kids, so I mean, it doesn't. So I mean, all that's going to happen to her is that her already long political career will probably end, and she's probably already ready for retirement. And like, that's my real problem. It's that like she has no skin in the game.
Well,
like, this is something
okay, right. I mean, I see your point, but and I agree, but there's something more fundamental. In other words, you're against democracy for this reason. But
yes.
what I'm trying to say is that you're against democracy, so you want the opposite of democracy.
Well, here's the thing. I would say that in theory I am against democracy, but I would say that I could support a form of democracy that's a lot less. I mean, that there's a lot less options on the table for politicians, and that there would have to be certain things that they would not.
What you're saying is that you want in America, for instance, you want the constitutional order to be respected. That's what you're saying. I mean, Angela Merkel has no business. I mean, I don't know what the German constitution is, but I don't see how any head of state has any business decreeing a massive transfer of population.
I think another problem that we have in the current society, though, is that a lot of the legal precedent is already there, which allows for this. And B,
well, yeah, but that could be rolled back.
Not easily.
Well, nothing is easy, but theoretically it could be rolled back. I mean, if nothing's easy, then nothing's going to change. But things are constantly changing. But then also in these European countries, they're not very democratic.
Yeah, like
there's kind of a veneer of democracy.
Yeah, like an example that Mencius Moldbug used was that what he said was that in say that if Bolivia invaded the United Kingdom, well, who would win that war? Obviously the United Kingdom, but then we have to take into account that every single Bolivian soldier had to be given the full right of the law. They could only be fired upon if they could only be fired upon if they fired first.
Right.
They would have the right to be assumed innocent. They could only be detained if accused of an actual crime, and just all these like rights that's awarded under liberal democracy. Bolivia would win that war because the British have all these ridiculous laws that prevent them from actually.
Well, yes and no. I mean, okay, I mean, that's true what you're saying. But on the other hand, look what America's doing with drones. On the one hand, the Obama, he tied the hands. I don't know how it's going with Trump. I'm not following it. But under Obama, he tied the Army's hands with all these rules of engagement, as they're called. But on the other hand, he was cruising all over the place with his drones, killing off anybody he wanted to kill off.
Yeah, I think
I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying, that on the one hand, there's that. But on the other hand, there's this other thing. So it's not so cut and dried. So there's this secret war in Pakistan, for instance, going on with these drones. They're dropping bombs every day on Pakistan, and nobody's talking about it.
Oh yeah, I'm opposed to that.
I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I mean, to hell with these terrorists. But the point is that that on the one hand, your criticism is right, but on the other hand, there's these other things. So on the one hand, the American army has its hands tied, but on the other hand, it's so incredibly powerful that when it finds its little opportunity that it does something, it blows everybody up. They send in an F-16, and that's the end of the whole village.
But I guess this also kind of could go back to just the lack of accountability, though, because I mean, again, like all these wars, I'm generally opposed to the wars in the Middle East because I don't really see the benefit to us from them. But I just think it kind of goes back to the lack of accountability that I really see.
Well, so what, my answer to that, or it's not my answer, but my analysis of that situation is that it gets back to the cultural problem. I mean, we've become corrupt. It used to be that the American system, I mean, there was always corruption, of course, but the American system functioned more within the constitutional norms, and politicians were more restrained, and they stayed within their mandates, and they were more. I mean, there was never a time when everything was ideal, but it was better than it is now, and with this crazy, these crazy global elites running amok and destroying whole regions of the world with their craziness. It's so there to me, it's less a question of the system and more a question of the morals. We're having this. That's what happened to the Roman Empire. I mean, they fell apart morally. They were stronger and stronger militarily. The administration was more and more elaborate and incredible. They built these roads everywhere. I mean, they had this incredible setup, but they became soft and corrupt, and the whole thing just collapsed from within. It's a famous story.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening to the West. I mean, that seems to be your analysis too.
Yes. Yeah, and because I think I see the answer as really a return to a more traditional time.
If people, but right, of course. So in other words, you want, for instance, get rid of divorce, get rid of this celebration of homosexuality, get rid of grade inflation, get rid of egalitarian admission to schools, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that
more meritocracy, more severe morals, right?
Yeah, I'd say a more ordered, more structured society that with a lot more. I guess
isn't that a question? I mean, of course, the society supports the morals. There's no question about that. But ultimately, it would be individuals standing up for the good social norms.
Well, yes, I think that there needs to be more healthy social norms in society.
But we used to have them, right? I mean,
exactly.
So the point is to get them back. Endeavor, have you ever read any Jack Vance?
No, I haven't.
No. Well, do you know that your idea of this cyclical thing of society?
Yes.
Of history. Well, you know about Spengler?
Yes, I do.
Oswald Spengler. Well, you know that Spengler's thesis is a little bit different from yours.
Okay.
Spengler's thesis is that civilization rises up, and then it becomes corrupt, and it goes down, and it dies, and that's the end of it. That's how he sees it. It's very pessimistic. And then he sees out of the ruins, it's not that the civilization rises again, but a new civilization rises up. That's Spengler's idea. Now, he's right or he's wrong. Now, the reason I mentioned Jack Vance, who's an absolutely wonderful writer, and it's very, very amusing, but it's full of political ramifications. Jack Vance imagines an institution. He imagines this galactic society, and he writes lots of different books which occur more or less in this galactic society. And they're different planets, and usually his stories involve some culture on some planet. But there's this institution which is everywhere, and it's rather secretive, but it's very prestigious. It's called the Institute, and the job of the Institute is to make sure that these different civilizations, the different societies on these different planets, don't become corrupt, and so they're constantly machinating to push people. They sabotage new technologies. They try to keep people close to the land, close to reality, and so that they'll be moral and so on. You get the point? And
Yep.
So Jack Vance in these things, it's rather comic, but the underlying idea is trying to get around Spengler. Jack Vance was very, very impressed and influenced by Spengler. He was born in 1920. I think. Or was he born? Was it either 20 or 26? Or he was born in the 20s. And so in the 30s and 40s, Spengler was very influential, and Jack Vance took that in. So he made this huge effort to try to figure out ways to rejuvenate the cultural vigor of these different societies, and that's what that's what you and I are interested in.
Yes.
Yeah, and I look at it from the point of view of art. Not that I don't look at it from those other points of view, but I mean, I feel that this horrible thing that's happened to us, that's happening, has already totally happened to art. Painting has been killed. This tremendous painting tradition that started up at the end of the 13th century, and that fills our museums, and it's one of the glories of Western culture. It's over, and it's been over for decades, and it's a tragedy. And now we're getting into this gay pride society.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think I see like the death of art as kind of a result of just Western man's lack of faith, really, and just lack of belief in something bigger than him, really.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I just see with a lot of this modern art, it's just I mean,
contemporary art is what because the term because modern art can either mean art starting in the 19th century, or when I was a kid, modern art meant starting in the 15th century.
Oh yeah. So I mean, the contemporary art, I mean, it just seems to be just expression. Yeah, it seems like expression for just the sake of trying to I guess shock value oftentimes, like
it's solipsistic, and people are involved. It's navel gazing.
Yeah,
and there's no art in it, because art is the art of something.
Yeah,
it's just pure expression. It's literature. It's a kind of corrupt literature, because literature is also the art of writing, and that's gone too. So what I'm saying is that it's good to have an idea of the system and the laws and the structure that you want, but isn't ultimately the problem a moral problem?
Yes, I think it boils down to that.
And so then the question is, what do you do about that? And my answer to that is that and this is not original with me at all, and this is something that Jordan Peterson says in a way. I mean, the thing that you can really, really influence in society, if you can, and even that is difficult, Jordan Peterson points out the problems with that, is yourself.
Yeah, so I agree. I think that one of the fundamental differences between the right and the left is that I think that the right kind of sees I guess morality and as something that society needs, and that society kind of needs to have this restrictive system of morality on people in order to actually
well, there's the idea of but there's the idea of individual responsibility. Yeah, so the left is not interested in individual responsibility.
Well, I think the difference is with the left is that they kind of see a moral system as something that kind of restricts freedom, and that by
Yeah,
removing a moral system, then people will become more virtuous people by having less restrictions, less
yeah,
moral
that's
boundaries
Rousseau's
on them.
idea. That's Rousseau's idea. You know, that society corrupts people, but if they're left to their natural instincts, they'll be good and gentle and wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's
And every
fundamentally wrong.
yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
there's maybe some truth in it, you know, because if you, you know, think of all these stories of you know, the orphans who are beaten and so on, and then, or you know, people who are mistreated, then they start mistreating other people. I mean, it's not as if there aren't grains of truth in it. But the point I'd like to make here is that the idea of individual responsibility, I mean, ultimately, you can have restrictions, but the restrictions are really norms. I mean, what do? Somebody does something bad and then you whip them, you know, and okay, and eventually if they do it bad 3 times, what do? You kill them because they're not fitting in. So that would be a very repressive thing. But the dynamic free society is where people stand up individually for these norms, and they have a collective ideal, and they defend them individually, starting with themselves, and then using social pressure and eventually punishment for other
Yes.
people. But so there's this aspect in the kind of right that you're talking about. There's the idea of individual responsibility, being responsible for yourself, holding up your end of the stick.
Yes.
And
I
and
think,
and,
yeah, I definitely think that individual responsibility is it
and that,
definitely is something of the right that
yeah. So but and I'm not trying to be cute. I'm really not. But that is an important aspect of, you know, what you could call the importance of the individual.
yep.
And of course, that view of the individual is a very, very different view of the individual released from all social norms, who just is floating monad. But it's the individual who chooses to uphold the goodness because he sees that the thing is right, and other people share this correct vision of what the truth is and what they should do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that one place you really can see the battle of whether or not society needs morality is if you remember from about 10 years ago, the new atheists, you know, Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins,
Yeah,
you know, those guys.
yeah. Mm.
Well, I think that their view was that religion was causing ills in society because of what they would say as well. Look at how they said that, look at how, like, in Islam they stone people, or look at how Christians were against homosexuality, or they had different roles for men and women, and kind of the view that the new atheists had is that if we just strip away all that structure that Christianity provided Western civilization, we would have this more equal and more enlightened society, and that, you know, science would, and they also would say that it was holding back scientific development. And I think that
Mm.
the real place that they were really wrong is that they looked at history as if through this utopian lens, that they think that if you were to just strip away the religion, the structure and spirituality of the medieval times, well, oh, they would have just been these perfect individuals. I think that really just goes into the right and left dichotomy there, and that I think the real end result of the new atheists is that, you know, when now that we have actually lost that sense of morality, we're not these more enlightened people, we're not these more caring people. We certainly aren't, like, I mean, you know, I think that we're obviously advancing technologically, but I don't think it's because of atheism. But what the end result really is this, like, you know, transgenderism for children, nihilism, social justice warriors. That's the end result of Western man losing his morality and his sense of structure. That's the end result of the new atheism, is not Star Trek, but these social justice warriors. That's the end result, I think.
Yeah, but again, the new atheists are just a flavor of this modern idea of getting rid of society. You know, that was the French Revolutionary idea.
Yeah.
Anything that provided any kind of structure or authority was to be banished.
Yeah, I think that generally is that generally has been the kind of the mindset of the left for most of its history, is that the left kind of sees the abolishment of traditional society as a good thing. They see that as progress, really.
Yeah, yeah. So how to get back? That's the thing.
Yeah, I think it's about restoration, and I think that's kind of what I think that's what kind of what you and I are both working towards.
Yeah, but in painting, I've gone through a lot of evolution. About when I was young, I thought that modern art, by modern art, I don't mean contemporary art. I mean Cubism and so on.
Yes.
I thought it was responsible in a way for these things, and now I understand that modern painting, particularly starting with certain painters in the 19th century, like Puvis de Chavannes and Daumier and other artists, were actually reactionaries, because painting had become completely taken over by revolutionary values, and the revolutionary values were killing painting because they were instrumentalizing it. And so instead of it being itself, it's a whole complicated thing. I developed this in a lot of videos, but it was no longer, painting was no longer any good. It was getting worse and worse, and they wanted to revitalize the essence of it, and they were reactionaries, so they went back to the basic values of painting. And part of what that gave was were certain of the modernist styles, like Fauvism and so on, and Impressionism in a certain way, and so on. And so now these modern ways of painting are quite different from the old ways, but they retain the essence of it. So as a result, I'm concentrated in painting on the essence of painting and not the superficial look of it. So my painting, it looks pretty realistic to someone who doesn't know a lot about painting, but it's all full of modernist influence, not contemporary art, which is not even painting at all. But and I feel the same way about society. Society is going to inevitably, one way, it's going to take new forms. We're not going to, it's always going to be something else, because things are always changing. Basic situations are always changing. But what we want is to keep the essence alive. And that essence will not necessarily have the outward appearance that society has previously had.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's the thing.
Yeah, I think that really, in terms of being because as you know, I call myself a reactionary. It's not necessarily like recreating the past, because you can't ever do that. It's recreating kind of the essence, I guess, of it, in that you're recreating a structured society with that is one that you can really be proud of. That's kind of what you'd like to be recreating, because for example, if we look at a country like Britain, for example, it was Britain in the 17th century, it was Britain in the 18th century, it was Britain in the 19th century, and I think like over that time it changed as a society, but it really has always maintained that essence. But I think that in the modern day is that what's really happening with these societies that they're dying in a way that they aren't changing. They're changing, but they're changing in a way that they will no longer become what they what they've been over the centuries.
Well, I agree with you. There are influences now that are at work which are unprecedented.
Yeah, because I think like what's going to happen is that not only these countries are going to change, but I mean I think that the essence of them, that being kind of that a people, a shared identity, a culture, and
I agree. I agree. So,
that's
for
going to die.
instance,
Yeah, that's going to die.
right? My wife, who was born in 1920, she felt that the French had lost their esprit. Do you know French?
Nope. I studied it for 7 years. I should know it, but I don't.
Yeah, I studied it for 9 years and learned nothing. But esprit is a word that means intelligence or wit, or the French used to have this incredibly sparkling intellectual tradition and life that's more or less gone. I mean, there's little scraps of it here and there, but basically it's gone. And my wife lamented that. And then you have the English spirit. I mean, which they have their special kind of humor and all those things. There's bits of them left, but they're all going away. But these things, these kinds of national characteristics depend in a certain way on isolation. And we now live in a world where national isolation is over. I mean, where I'm living now, for instance, I've got a neighbor. She was born here, and she's still living here, and she's never left. She's never gone anywhere. This is what she knows. In France, there's still there's the final peasants. When 10 years from now, there won't be any of these people left.
Yeah.
But now her children, running around. Some are more local, but they've all moved around. They're living in cities now. They're no longer working the land, or they even go internationally and do things. And we're living in a world where everybody is rubbing up, even without immigration, even without this crazy immigration. We're living in a world, there's all this TV, we watch documentaries about all these things we know about, so much stuff that's going on in other places, and there's all this, the oceans and other planets, and there's all this consciousness and this communicating technology. I mean, the fact that you and I are talking like this live between France and Canada is part of that.
Yeah.
And we're
so your wife was born 98 years ago?
She was born 100 years ago.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Was that your first wife?
My only wife. She we were married 25 years, I guess.
Wow.
Or 30. Were we married 90? 20 years. We were married 20 years. She died in 95.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah. She was 35, 36 years older than me, but she was the youngest and best looking woman in any room. And she had that old French thing. I mean, she was, she was completely warm and friendly with everybody, but she, there was no fooling with her. Nobody could come over her. And people used to be that way,
Yeah. I think that another interesting book. I haven't read the whole thing, but it was a book that, called Forgotten Warriors, and what a guy did. It was in 2009. He wrote it, that he interviewed British war veterans from the Second World War and asked them about how they felt about modern Britain, and pretty much without exception, all of them said that it was not the country that they fought for. They said that the things that they said were they weren't happy with the European Union. They weren't happy with homosexuality and with and most of all the immigration policy. And what they said was that what a lot of them said was, had they known how Britain was going to turn out, they wouldn't have done it. They wouldn't have done it in the first place. They said it wasn't the country that they fought for.
Yeah. Well,
that's I think that's kind of. Yep.
Well, but what I'm saying is that this if putting aside the immigration question.
Yes.
Just what's happening technologically with transportation, with communication, with commerce, with all these things that everybody knows about. The isolation that bred these particular characteristics, these particularisms, is become all mixed up. You can eat Chinese food anywhere.
Yeah.
And you can have great Chinese food prepared for you by people who aren't even Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
So it's but these things, as wonderful as they are they the essence? Are they the essence? I mean, if you're, I mean, these guys who fought World War II, fighting for something, being willing to fight for something, that's because these things aren't going to come back.
No.
And but life is going to go on. I mean, I'm sad about these things. It annoys me, to see these foolish French people who who are not living up to their fabulous tradition of intelligence, and who can't even speak French properly. And you even have politicians, important politicians, and intellectuals, and I speak better French than they do.
But I definitely agree with you that I think that it kind of goes beyond just the immigration policy. That I think it goes to that
immigration makes it worse.
I mean, that makes it worse. But I think that what happened is that these nations kind of have died on the inside, and kind of like their spirit has been crushed in a way.
Well,
and that's kind of what
there's you could say that there's an aspect of them that can no longer live because of the conditions are no longer right. But I don't want to be I don't want to be starry-eyed and optimistic, because that's not how I feel. But it may be that there's a deeper essence that can be summoned up, that will be revealed, that will come out, assuming we don't lose the battle. I mean, look what happened to Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe has been truly crushed. I mean, do you follow V at all?
Yeah, I know who he is. I'm not a fan of him though.
Well, I mean, I watched a video that he made a couple of years ago about Romania, and I know this because I know people from Eastern European countries. But these countries are totally corrupt. Nobody will, nobody will stand up for. Everybody's out for themselves. They're totally selfish. There's no collective spirit at all. And this is because generation after generation after generation has been crushed under tyranny. There's nothing left of them. And so it's fully possible to completely crush a people. And yet V himself, he's got a very Slavic character. I know people like this who've got the crazy, self-deprecating, extravagant sense of humor. And they're very excitable and violent, these Slavs. And it's part of the sort of an alarming Slavic national character, or, racial characteristic, or the characteristic of the people who live out there. And so, so I'm saying that even without immigration, now the immigration problem I regard as terribly grave, and it's something that I think it's already. I mean, there's already low-level civil wars going on with this.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think V is I don't think V is a Slav. I think he's actually a gypsy. But I get your point. I get your point though. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, but he behaves that way.
Oh yeah, I get your point though.
The gypsies are something else. There's a lot of gypsies around here. They've retained their character, and it's not very good. But so you know, I think that it's I can't help being annoyed and sad about the loss of these things, but at the same time, I'm concentrating my energy on trying to embody myself in what I do and how I am in what I think are the attitudes and actions that ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, in painting, I'm trying to. It's completely quixotic, of course, because now, as I say, painting is destroyed. But I'm trying to embody what I think, and I wish somebody would correct me. You know, I wish someone would say, no, you know, you're wrong about that. Do that so I could advance. But the essence of that thing, and in other words, trying to make the thing live.
Yeah. So I got a comment on that. If you called a Romanian a Slav in Romania, they'd probably try to kill you. But yeah,
well, just call him a Slav, not a Slav.
Well, I don't think Romanians are Slavs, but I mean, okay, I got your point though. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, well, Romanian is, I don't know about the Romanians, but Romanian itself is a Latin language.
Yes.
There's a lot of commerce between Romania and France because the languages are rather close.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I definitely think though that it's really a question of really like Western man really trying to embody. I think you're right that he's trying to embody something that maybe we've lost in a way.
Well, that's in danger of being lost if individuals won't. I mean, you know, you'd lose a war if you don't have a whole lot of guys willing to risk their lives to win the battle.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's again, I mean, you know, in the army you get forced, but if people behave cowardly, at a certain point, a certain number of individuals have to stand there and be ready to die.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and maybe they will die and lose, but unless they stand there and give it a try, there's no hope at all. So it's like that. It's being part of that army.
Yeah, I think that kind of I think what we're getting at is that I think that kind of this revivalism. I think this is kind of what nationalism. I think that's kind of what I see the value in it in that kind of reviving what it means to actually be.
Well, okay, it could be that. It could be that, but it's not necessarily national because the Western tradition itself is not a national thing, and it may be that nations are finished. No, that may be, and even without the immigration problem, because the immigration problem to me is not so much a national problem. It's a cultural problem. But no, I mean, you imagine if they managed to get so many immigrants and that they were actually 2/3 of the population. You know, then the whole thing would completely cease.
Well, yeah, and then within 100 years, that'll be the case.
Well, you know, again, watch out. You know, it's like predicting that the ozone hole is going to grow bigger. That the ozone hole closed up.
if nothing changes it. I mean, I think that there will be change in the time, but I mean, I think it's kind of a, that's kind of why we're here. Well, that's kind of why I'm here. But yeah.
Right, right. So I mean, things are. I mean, it seems pretty clear that in the next 4 or 5 years, that many more European countries are going to turn against the EU and
Yes.
become very severe with immigration, the way Italy is doing.
Yes, I think it's good.
And the way Austria. So you've got Italy now. You've got Hungary, and bit by bit this is going to happen. Or if that doesn't happen, then like what happened in France, you're going to have these elites stealing the elections, and then what's going to happen then? How's that going to play out? Are people going to stand being turned into subjects to that extent? No, maybe they will, maybe they won't. I mean, in France, for instance, they've got all these restrictions and laws and more restrictions, and what happens is that people ignore them, so that half of everything that goes on outside of the established norms, and the society becomes not lawless exactly, but it becomes, kind of a bandit society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you can definitely see that in Canada. Like, for example, I mean, I guess this is one of the reasons that I would call myself a nationalist, and this is one of the really things I'm trying to fight for is kind of just a revival of an actual Canadian identity. Because for example, I'm Scottish. My family's been in Canada for well over a century.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've got Scottish blood too.
The thing is though that Canada was a British country. They had the Union Jack in their flag. They had the red ensign. That was the Canadian flag. And then there was also French Canada, but it was very much a European, very much a British nation. And it had a strong national identity prior to the 1960s. But today, though, I mean, first of all, where I live, there's no one else. Like, we're called old stock Canadians, so as in like someone who's of British or French descent who's been in Canada for several generations. You're called an old stock, and there's no other old stocks where I live. And the ones that are, they have no conception of their own history. They think that multiculturalism is their culture, and they think that they have no culture beyond the cultures that they import. And it's really like it's really quite sad, just the way of just the lack of fortitude that I think that the Canadian people have. And I think that it kind of, one of my goals is really to just restore that sense of identity and the sense of meaning that.
How can you do
lost?
That?
Well, I think it's.
How can you still a sense of?
Oh, sorry, you're breaking up, Paul.
Of the there?
Yeah, you broke up for a second.
Yeah. Okay. So, how would you instill the sense of identity?
Well, I think it's through things like nationalism, like trying to actually get people to feel like they're part of a collective of some kind.
Well, how would you do that?
Well, that's what I think kind of people on the dissident right, that's what we're really trying to do, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but my own personal effort, I'm not trying to convert anybody else, but I mean, in a way, I try to influence people when it comes to painting. I don't think I'm doing a very good job, but my idea would be to concentrate on the essential things that are allied with truth, and the regional and national flavors will take care of themselves or not. I mean, I don't know what can be. Those things seem somewhat mean, I've explained how I regret those things, but at the same time, I don't. A lot can be done about it. Those are things that happen on their own. But you can get back to the idea of truth. You can fight against relativism, and you can argue, because this business of relativism is so destructive. And you can point out how stupid relativism is, and then get back to arguing about what's true.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to me like a profound aspect of our decadence. That we're sunk in this relativism. Yeah, I mean, if you can't get past that, how can you how can you get to anything? And
yeah,
then
exactly.
And then I mean, probably geography and just local association will generate certain cultural flavors, regional and national flavors. For instance, if you took the frontier times of America and all these cowboys going out there and fighting the Indians and confronting nature and so on, and these frontier women and so on, and you had to be really tough and adventurous and so on. And then eventually the whole thing gets settled in, and you have cities and you have urban life and so on. And people remember the cowboy spirit, the spirit of the Wild West, and the spirit of the frontier. And they remember it, and they nurture it in their heart, more or less. And they have a gun, they know how to use it, maybe. And maybe they can ride a horse or something. But it's a different world. Yeah. And that world eventually is going to rub off on them.
Yeah.
And then it's going to rub off on their children, and rub off on their children's children, and rub off on their great grandchildren. And there's no frontier. There's no. It's gone. It's gone. It was something that happened. It was great.
Yeah, but I think that is kind of something that we've lost is kind of the intergenerational transfer of culture, really. So
yes,
like,
but also
yeah. Oh, yeah. So the idea that my grandfather was born here, my father was born here. We've really kind of just lost that that kind of sense of a lineage.
The world that your grandfather, I mean, maybe he built the house you're living in or something.
Well, no, he didn't. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Well, you can imagine that. You can imagine that somebody came out there and cleared the land themselves and built the house. And then if you're living in it 5 or 6 generations later, which could happen. I mean, Victor Davis Hanson lives in a house his great grandparents built or something. Yeah. So, but you're living in a different world, even though you're living in the same house, and there's a lot of similarities. You're on the same land and so on. Mm-hmm. But the world changes around us.
Yeah.
And and so I don't know. I mean, identities. I don't think identities are something that you can manufacture, that you can influence. I mean, they just are what they are.
Well, I think you can influence them. I think that the problem isn't necessarily that the world changes. The problem is that we're really kind of losing the things that make us who we are. So kind of like I said before, is that a country, or like I think what I said before was that that these countries are going to become to a point where they aren't what they've been over the centuries, and it doesn't mean that they're just not the same. But what it means is that they've lost the essence of what has made them.
Yeah, I mean, to one extent or another. I mean, the things that make England, the actual topography is basically the same. The trees, the kind of trees that grow there, the kind of stone that you find, the kind of plants, the weather, those things don't change. So some things change and some things don't.
Well, I
And
mean,
some,
I think what's changed though is kind of the spirit, this, you know, the spirituality though of it. Like I
well,
don't.
that's right. I mean, I mean, so if you get back to Christianity, I mean,
Yes.
then, you know, that would be something if you could get back to Christianity.
Yeah.
So, but there again, you know, if you look at, to go back to the beginning of our conversation, nationalism, particularly French revolutionary nationalism, was very much against the internationalism of the Catholic Church.
Yep. Yeah, I think that it can kind of it functions differently. Kind of like I said, I guess nationalism really depends on what context it's under.
Yeah, I mean, but the nature of these nations, before the 17th and 18th century, nations didn't really exist. It was still a feudal kind of world where it was families and so on. And
Yes.
now we've, you know, with these trading alliances and these war alliances, and you get these groups of countries that they have to work together to you know, what do you do in the face of Russia? You've got to make alliances, and then now we've got all this commerce, and now we've got a new, you know, in the old days everybody spoke Latin, and then for a long time everybody spoke French.
Yeah.
And now everybody speaks English. So there's this constant, you know, there's an empire, whether it's the French or the British or the Americans or the Romans or the Arabs, whatever it is, and then you have these different regions, and they're grouped and ungrouped, and this is something that's always been more or less mobile, and these civilizations, you know, come up and go down, and they're different things, and we are in a period of transition. There's no question about that, a violent transition, and the immigration problem is like, you know, we've got we're out on shifting sands, and then someone's shooting cannonballs at us. but the basic problem is the shifting sands, and there's no getting around that. So, I mean, we can't get away from nostalgia, but I think that the past is always going to be the past. I'm not saying, you know, that we should just give up on these things. It's like reading books. One should read Plato. The world of Plato is gone, but the essence of Plato is there in his writing, and and that essence is something that has fueled Western culture century after century after century. And it's fertilizer that's brought forth these marvelous plants that are what we call Western culture. And to me, that's where the essence of the thing is. Those are the things that have to be concentrated on, and these other things come and go, and some of them we've lost for sure. Just as we've lost the Western frontier in the New World.
Yeah, I think that another thing though that often I think you brought up earlier was the individual. So and you know I would agree with I would agree with quite with several things that you had said. I think that one of the problems is though that the interpretation of individual today I think is very flawed in the sense that people like Dennis Prager or even Jordan Peterson would use the phrase. I think that they very much miss the point that I think that what individualism would have been in Western society, perhaps prior to the 20th century.
Well, yeah. Did you see the little video I did, the debrief on our last conversation?
Yes, I did. It was a good video.
And so that's my answer to that. I mean, it's not the sovereignty of the individual; it's the sacred individual, the sacred quality of the individual.
Yeah.
And I think Jordan Peterson is making a little mistake there, because it's true what you're saying. I agree. This idea of the sovereign individual is totally out of hand. I mean, it's really the what's that word for those babies who rule the family? Those these spoiled brats who run their parents. The enfants rois, they say in French. This giving this Rousseauian extremism that makes it so the children don't get raised anymore, and they become these. They end up becoming snowflakes and SJWs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think though that a mistake that people often make is because I really think there's a very much a false dichotomy is between what people will often say is that collectivism and versus individualism, and like for example, like Dennis Prager, what he'll say is that the right stands for the individual, whereas the left stands for the collective, and I really don't think of it. I think that's a very flawed dichotomy, because I think that someone can be an individual, but they can also be part of a collective, and I think they can be part of a political collective at the same time.
But the way I would put it is that what we like to see is individuals who are ready to fight, and they're ready to fight for the truth, and if necessary, they'll fight alone. And if you have a band of individuals who are ready to fight alone, you've got a really dangerous army.
Yeah, I think though that I think though that one of the things is that,
I mean, that's another way to state this business of how the collective and the individual work together.
Yes, because I would agree with that. That the idea of individualism, it doesn't mean that you can't also be part of a collective. Because I see because this is
the collective would be the truth that you're fighting for.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think that
So, but each person has to carry that truth in their own heart.
Yes, I think that kind of gets back to what nationalism is about. I guess it would be individuals fighting for collectively for their nation, for their shared what kind of binds them together.
You could imagine Roman legionnaires from all over. They're fighting for the Roman Empire.
Yeah, exactly.
And which is not really a nation, because that would be
it was an empire. Yes, exactly.
And then you have these regional types, free Corsica, blow up houses on the coast, free Corsica, and so and these things can be more or less intelligent.
Yeah.
So what's our situation today? I mean, how much luck are you going to have instilling? What are you? You're an old sock.
Sorry?
Endeavor?
Yeah, I'm sorry. What was that?
You're an old sock in Canada?
Old stock.
Old stock. You're
Yes.
old stock. Well, how are you going to get these newcomers to have the feeling of the old stock?
Well, I don't think it's very easy to do that. I think that kind of what I would like to do is have the old stock actually gain some fortitude and actually actually try to continue their
so you want the old stock to remain the old stock.
Yeah, I would like us to kind of remain the dominant cultural force in the country.
Yeah, well, but will they stand up and do that?
Well, that's at this point, no, but that's what I'm trying to do, though. Yeah. I mean, because another thing I kind of wanted to touch on was I think that with nationalism, one thing that really frustrates me is when people like Sargon of Akkad, they'll call it identity politics, and I mean that's a phrase I really don't like, because I think that it's it assumes that politics isn't already largely influenced by that, because I really see nationalism as something that really kind of comes about naturally out of people, out of just the kind of this desire for in-group preference that I think is really.
Well, yes, except okay, but you've got to look at the origins of that term. I mean, that term, identity politics, was invented recently for people trying to gin up the American blacks against the whites.
But the thing is, though, that I don't. Yeah, I mean, the term is very recent, but I think it's really false when people say that we should be against.
But it's related. Those are words, identity politics. But what it is it's all about an effort to get groups fighting each other, and it's it was first about getting American blacks to feel that the American whites were against them, that they had to fight the whites.
Well, so, the thing is, though, that I think that I think though that that really the feeling, though, is that it really appealed to a kind of a nationalistic feeling amongst the African Americans. I think that's really kind of just natural for them to have.
It's not. There was nothing nationalistic about it at all. There was nothing. It was strictly racially based, and then it got into feminism. And that's not nationally based. So all the identity politics, until guys like you came along very, very recently. I mean, how long has this been going on in your mind? For 2 years?
About 2 years, yeah.
Yeah. So until guys like you had that kind of reaction to, say, Sargon, and I mean, I know other people. I mean, I'm more familiar with your thinking about this, but people who commented on my channel and so on, and other things I've watched, they're giving identity politics a different meaning. It's not. Yeah, identity politics has nothing to do with nation. It has to do with these groups who have no national quality whatsoever, like being black or being a woman or being a homosexual.
Well, here's the thing.
Transsexual.
I think that you have to make a. Well, I mean, the point I was trying to make is that I think that people being opposed to nationalistic tendencies by calling it identity politics are I think that they're really misguided, because I think that nationalism is something that really and kind of tribalism, in-group preference, these things are really just kind of something that's human nature, and I think that they'll develop.
Well, yes, but again, it's a manipulation.
But, yeah, here's the thing, though. Hold on. When he was still on the internet, Braving Ruin had said that I really agreed with what he had said, was that the difference between nationalism versus what you would call social justice identity politics is that something like being a African American or a German or a Chinese person or a British person, these things are historically founded. It's an identity that's been grown through over a course of time, and it's really developed as a people. Whereas something like LGBT, genderqueer, transsexual, whatever, this is stuff that's just made up by some cat lady in a gender studies class. Like, it's not something that exists in any sense of in any really form of reality, other than kind of just a manipulation. And I really just see that as kind of a false something that people.
All right, but here's how I would analyze that. Yes, I mean, these identities, they were invented to gin up different groups against each other, and then when people started defending, when people started complaining about immigration very strongly, then the term was turned on them, and nationalism was identified with identity politics. But the thing is that a nation is a complex mix of men and women and eventually other races, certainly in America. I mean, America has a huge history, say, with the blacks and the Chinese. You know, the Chinese were brought over in the 19th century, and
Well, the thing is though that I think that
but what I'm saying is that it's comparing apples and oranges. So that the identity, this business of labeling the anti-immigration people as playing identity politics is a manipulation. It's trying to tar them with the brush of these ridiculous leftists.
But yeah, because I often hear the argument that Sargon of Akkad or Dennis Prager, what they'll say to people, they'll say about me is that I'm playing identity politics and that I'm playing the same game as the left, which I don't really think of it
because except that when the defense against immigration becomes about race, and then the terms start to converge.
Well, I mean, I think that though that in a way, nationality is very much intertwined with.
Okay. Except that if you take America and then you take Black Americans.
Yes.
On the one hand, when you have America and Americans, you can have that they can be black. I mean, they've been there for centuries.
I agree with that, but I think.
But then when the identity politics is peeling the Black Americans away from their American identity.
Well, you see, I disagree. I disagree with that because I think that there might be an American identity, but at the same time, I think that there is a Black American, there is a unique Black American identity.
Well, there's a unique identity. I mean, Jack Vance has this great phrase. I mean,
and I would also argue
every single person is a minority of one. You know,
but what I'm saying though is that I think that, and I would also say on the flip side that there is a unique white American identity too. It's harder to say.
There's lots of white American identities.
Well, no, the point I'm trying to make though is that they're within the identity of America. I think that there is multiple what could you be considered there is different groups, and I think that I think most African Americans will tell you that they very much identify with their own ethnic group rather than with
okay, but sure. I mean, but again, but Jordan Peterson points this out. We have multiple aspects to ourselves. I'm half Jewish, half Protestant, Bohemian from New York. I'm very different, say, from the Swedish immigrants in Minnesota, or from the Mormons, or from the Texans, or from I know people,
but
in these areas.
Yeah, I don't think though that that someone necessarily pursuing the interests of a group is necessarily.
But the thing is that it's it starts with Black identity politics. That's where it starts.
Well, the thing is, here's the thing. I think that it's more for them. It's more of a form of nationalism in a sense. I think.
For them, who?
For my I often see that as a kind of a form of nationalism in itself, because I think it's pursuing the interest of a.
But Endeavor, that has nothing to do with nationalism. It was a manipulation by communists and leftists to create trouble between American citizens.
Was it really a manipulation though? Because that community.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
I don't agree. I don't agree.
Well, I mean, people glommed onto it, and they made it something important.
Well, it always existed though as a community, though it existed.
No, there was never identity politics. It's a new term. I mean, of course, there was group problems. There's always been group problems. There's group problems between different groups of whites too. But the term identity politics comes out of a very recent leftist effort. I mean, it's from the 80s or something.
Oh yeah, I agree.
It, you know, it's
The term is recent, but I think though that the um the collective of
well, I
I
mean,
guess
the thing about the blacks is that they're a very easily identified
but
minority
they've
group.
always had their own collective though.
But you had the Irish when the Irish came over. You know, there was a whole problem with the Irish when the Italians came over. And I mean, I grew up in New York. There were still the remnants of that. I mean, it was the real hard times were over. But you know, like the police department in New York is totally dominated by the Irish, and the garbage men in New York, they're all Italians. I mean, that's still going on.
Yeah.
So you
Okay.
still have this.
Another example I can use is that historically what it was in Canada was the French. There was French Canadians and there was Anglo Canadians. I mean, I would be an Anglo.
Mm-hmm.
There was like, and I don't. Would it be called identity? Would you call it identity politics that the French Canadians thought of themselves as different than the Anglo Canadians?
No, they because the term is so new, and it was all about creating dissension. I mean, if what's been going on between the French Canadians and the British Canadians for centuries in Canada is, I mean, if you call it identity politics, it's anachronistic.
Well,
These
yeah,
were,
exactly. What it is
uh,
though is okay. The point I'm trying to get at is that these like French Canadian and Anglo Canadian were very much they very much were different peoples in a sense.
yes, and there were conflicts. And they were conflicts because the French Canadians want to have more sovereignty, and some of them do, some of them don't. They can't quite get the vote that they want. So some of them they're more or less attached to Canada. Some want to get rid of Canada and have their own country and blah blah blah. But is that you have struggles like that, but labeling it identity politics brings it right into this. It's not the right term. It's not the
Okay.
right term.
The point I'm trying to I agree with you on that, but the thing is, the point I'm trying to get at is it's not the term necessarily, but I think of say French Canadians and Anglo Canadians seeing themselves as different people, or perhaps white Americans and Black Americans thinking of themselves as having their own communities.
There are differences.
I think that's kind of something that's just naturally.
Well,
That's just a
yes,
natural
I
cultural
agree.
development.
I mean, I absolutely agree. And of course, you have very large Black communities that are practically separate, and there's lily white communities, but there's other communities that were mixed. And these kinds of struggles. The thing that became identity politics is newfangled. It's newfangled because it's there's something normal about these groups struggling with each other and coming to arrangements with each other and mingling more or less, because there is mingling between these groups. So it's sort of a struggle. It's a kind of a I don't want not a friendly struggle, but it's a sort of a love-hate relationships, but which goes on everywhere within families. All this is going politicking like this is groups in the playground, little cliques of little friends.
Yeah.
Who's better? And so
the point I was trying to get originally
yeah,
though is that I think that there's a very big difference between I mean, the point I was trying to get at is that I disagree with the criticism of people like Sargon of Akkad.
Yes, I hear you.
The criticism I'm trying to have is that I just think that their interpretation of individualism is just flat out wrong, and that I think that because what they'll say is that like for me that what I'm doing is the same thing as what social justice warriors are doing, which I think is because I think that's just flat out false.
There's you see, the thing is, I think you're being not completely, but somewhat. You're allowing yourself somewhat to be manipulated, and it's not a deliberate manipulation, but the use of these terms, which are imposing themselves on phenomenon which are much larger and different, and have different flavors, and And by buying into the term, here's how I see what you're doing. When you call yourself a reactionary,
yes,
that's what the French would call that a provocation. You understand?
Provocateur.
A provocation, and
Yes.
it's a French term that means doing something that is going to provoke a certain kind of reaction. That so, in other words, doing something that's somewhat not acceptable, but to make a point. And so I understand and I admire that. So you say you're a reactionary. You're standing up to these people and you're saying, "Fuck you." You're against Western culture. I'm for it. And then they're saying, well, you're just for the white people, and you're saying, yes, I'm for the white people. White identity politics.
Well, it's again, yeah. Go ahead.
I know you're not a guy who screams out white identity politics. I know that.
Yeah.
You're looking at natural groups and how things function regularly. But in my analysis, it's kind of a provocation. It's a little. It's provocative, but the thing is that there's not a proper matchup with the term identity politics. I mean, maybe by your using it and people like you using it, it will wash itself out and become something better. But there's real problems with it because the way it's used from the beginning with the blacks and with the feminists was to, particularly with the feminists. See, because dividing black people.
I agree though that with like feminism again, and that's another thing that was just created in some Marxist professor's classroom, like because the idea that like men and women were in conflict with each other, that's like a 20th century idea. That's like nothing.
But they are in conflict with each other. They are in conflict with each other.
Well, I mean, but not in this like Marxist sense though.
No, but right, but there it is. You see, that's what I'm talking about.
It's not in this like oppression.
And that's the problem with the term identity politics. I mean,
yeah,
there's. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Okay. So I mean, feminism is as it's. No, it was never any good. It was never any good.
I agree with you on that one.
But it's become something profoundly perverse. Right?
Yes.
It's worse than black identity because black identity, at least there's men and women in there. But now they're now, and it has naturally led to this whole gender thing because the women in this struggle, this ridiculous struggle for equality in quotes, want to abolish these. They want to make it like being a woman is like being black.
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't.
Being a woman is not like being black.
Oh yeah, it doesn't make sense in the sense that it doesn't make sense to assign kind of this Marxist narrative to it. I think because I had explained in one of my videos. I mean, these things existed well, they exist in nature in order to carry on a species, but I think they exist in society in order to like perpetuate the society, really.
But like, these conflicts, you can't get away from them. You can't get away from the problem of a woman wanting to have children but being annoyed by the duty that's going to take up so much of her life. You can't get away from that, and you can't get away from a guy who he wants to bed the girl, but he doesn't want to take care of her for the rest of her life. I mean, these are the kinds of things that will never cease. Will never cease, and they are genuine conflicts. They create great misery for certain people, and you just can't get away from it. And one of the solutions has been to rigidify society and force people into these roles. And is it worse than what we've got now? It probably isn't worse than what we've got now.
Yeah, I think one of the I guess getting back to the idea of like of the left and the right is that I think that the I mean, what I would say is that people on the right generally see these things as natural and healthy human developments, and that that the differences in roles between men and women, it's because it made for a healthy society. It made for strong families. It made for good
Yes, but it also made people miserable.
What, in having children?
Well, because like, I don't know, my grandmother, she became a wife and her mother, and it didn't suit her. In fact, both my grandmothers.
The thing is, though, that
as soon as she had kids, she dumped the guy and got rid of him forever.
Well, that's the thing is, though, that you kind of need these things to happen if you're going to actually have a stable society, don't you?
Well, sure. Except
what I see on the left is that I see that they kind of seem to think that these things really they seem to think that they were created by someone in the past in order to maintain institutional
ridiculous.
Whatever, and
right.
Like, the way I see it, though, is that like this stuff really, like these kind of human dynamics really have just like developed naturally, and that kind of just is the natural order, and that's what makes for a stronger society. And in that, I think that the answer really should be to have a society that kind of is based on human nature and the natural order. And I think that natural order is a hierarchical one. I think it's a structured one, and I think it's one that is of course, less egalitarian than the present day world likes to think of itself as.
Yeah. Endeavor, listen, this has been great. My father needs my help now, so I'm gonna have to get off. But,
well, anyway, that's fine. We've been going on
for
almost 2 hours now, but hey, thanks for coming on, Paul. I think we had a good talk. I usually like to keep them about this length, so hey, I appreciate you coming on, and I like the channel down below.
Okay.
Used to be known as Paul Talks, but now he's known as used to be known as Thought Thug. Now he's
I changed from Paul Talk to Thought Thug because I got so annoyed with YouTube. But
well, anyway,
calm down.
So check his channel out. Go subscribe to him. Thank you for listening. Till next time, Endeavor. See you guys later.